Thank you very much. Thank you very much. My queens, I see you. Thank you very much. I want you to put your hands together for our very own Professor Demola Lewis. We can do better, we can do better. And we have with us today, also on the judging panel, Mr. Shola Adebayo. Please, a round of applause for him. And our chief judge for today is no stranger to this competition. Please, with a resounding round of applause, I give to you Professor Remi Ayede. Thank you so much for being here. And our timekeeper for today is Oladejo Ridwan Ayodeji. Please, a round of applause for him. And in our midst, we have a special guest. Please, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Professor Lawal, Dean, Faculty of Clinical Sciences. Thank you so much for being here, sir. Now, Dr. Ayede
is also here, Faculty of Education.
All right, we have a beautiful couple here. With us today, we have Dr. Ayede from the Faculty of Education, beautiful wife of Professor Ayede.
Faculty of Education.
Thank you so much for coming here this evening, ma'am. All right, we're moving on quickly to take in the modalities for this round. And to do that, please welcome on stage Professor Remi Ayede, I beg your pardon, our chief judge for today. Please, we can do better.
I say like campaign Tropicana. Me, I don't identity the marijuana. Joanna, Jubadi, Biomogana. Onjo Omlando for me, Moyagbe Los Goda. Nigga think I give up me, I done the streets since when them sing on God so Apala no be soca, see my team them no be feeder. Premier League is not UEFA, small body my engine bigger gun. When you show
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this semi-finals of Jawwar 2025. Jawwar 2025. I will simply go through the criteria that the judges will be using to assess the speaker today. The individual total score expected is a maximum of 105 marks. And these marks are distributed as follows. Appearance, 5 marks. Delivery, 20 marks. Content and facts, 30 marks. Remember, there are fact checkers. Persuasiveness, 10 marks. Logic, 10 marks. Refutation, 10 marks. Time management, 5 marks. Structure and organization of presentation, 10 marks. Rebuttals, 5 marks. Making, once again, the maximum total of 105. We have the timekeeper who will watch very closely to be sure that you manage your time. And on that basis, time management will be assessed. We also have other opportunities, like the best speaker for today. And then we also have the best performing team for today. Now, I also need to make one point that we also expect participants to conduct themselves as befitting of students of the University of Ibadan with the way they comport themselves, whether they win or lose. And in these circumstances, it is assumed that getting to the semifinals is itself an achievement because participation is of the essence. And on that note, I congratulate the various faculties and halls that have made it to the semifinals. Give them another round of applause. And as the chief judge, my position is let the best group win. So our rules are clear. We promise to be fair to everyone. And we hope that we'll have a very exciting moment, both on the part of the presenters and also on the part of the audience. Now, remember, I also have rules about participation from the audience. We don't want undue interference with the proceedings. And we also have rules about how you applaud so that everything can be in very good order. So I welcome all the participants. I wish you well. May your muse be with you. And for the audience, Jawwar 2025.
Point and kill is the concept. Buy you Lamborghini for your consent.
Ladies and gentlemen, before I call out the topic to be debated, I would like to also add an additional rule. In a case where your speaker makes a very resounding point, please don't shout. Rather what? Snap your fingers. Thank you so much. Welcome to the first round between the Faculty of Clinical Sciences versus the Faculty of Nursing. And the topic to be debated today is, will decentralizing revenue allocation help Nigeria achieve economic fairness? Will decentralizing revenue allocation help Nigeria achieve economic fairness? Please, with a resounding applause, make welcome the first speaker from the Faculty of Clinical Sciences in person of Victor Mung.
Tell me, are you ready? As they start, people yagba, they start to dance, yeah. But as I enter, I'm on the party scatter, party scatter, the party scatter, the party scatter. Tell me, are you ready, yo? Are you ready, yo? You're ready, latido. Listen to the do re mi do fa sol latido, fa sol latido.
Intellectual audience. According to the International Monetary Fund, revenue decentralization refers to giving state governments more control over how they collect and spend their resources. This means that contrary to the status quo, where federal government collect all the monies and then state governments have to wait for a portion to be returned to them, State governments now get to keep the bulk of the monies they make, while sending a fraction to the center. The Oxford Review defines fairness as a situation where individuals are treated justly and impartially, leading to everyone having equal access to resources, opportunities, and support, regardless of their status, background, or identity. Add this to the Cambridge Dictionary's definition of help as something that makes another thing more likely to happen. And we understand that today's topic is not asking if decentralization instantly guarantees economic fairness, but if it makes it more achievable. So we will be borrowing from the faculty across the road today and examining this topic using facts, logic, and common sense. My lords, may I, if I may, decentralization reduces regional disparities and increases development. Fact, according to Asimiyu and Kizito in 2014, their study showed that when state governments are empowered through decentralization, they actually have greater revenue growth, faster revenue growth rates. It also showed that in the Brookings Institute also found that when Nigerian states are allowed to have fiscal decentralization, these states actually are able to improve their economic indices. To take this debate further, logic, this shows that these states who are able to now control their resources are able to tap into their vast potential for growth, and it gives them the right incentives. Decentralization gives them these proper incentives because it gives them control of their resources, and it also gives them the motivation to use these resources for their own development. This is because they now know that their development is now in their own hands and the federal government isn't coming to save them. Common sense. If decentralization doesn't just expose disparities, but also equip states with the tools and motivations that are needed for growth, then clearly it makes fairness more achievable. My lord, may I, if I may, decentralization leads to equalization via redistribution mechanisms. Fact, according to a 2017 article by the OECD on this subject, decentralization is always accompanied by redistribution mechanisms. These redistribution mechanisms are certain subventions made by the federal government in order to offset inequalities amongst different states. Logic, because all states remit a fraction of their spending to the federal government, the federal government is still able to come in to help individual states where they are weak. So when my opponents come to say that the capacity of states are unequal and this would not lead to fairness, let them know that it already works in the real world. According to Canada's Department of Finance and the German fiscal equalization system, equalization in the last year guaranteed that all their states and provinces operated at a comparable level of public service. If they argue that Nigeria's situation is unique, let them know that equalization works by the same principles everywhere. Common sense. The OECD agrees. Data from countries like Canada and Germany shows that it works in the real world. Who then are my opponents with matric number 000419 to disagree? That simply does not tally. My lords, may I, if I may, decentralization strengthens accountability. Fact, a 2021 Journal of Money Laundering Control study by Olabanji Eweton showed that the real accountability problem in Nigeria is due to too little decentralization, and also that evolving both the way revenue is made and spent improves transparency. According to Steers, in Lagos State, where a large percentage of the revenue comes from local taxes, public pressure has driven reforms in certain critical areas like land use charges. Logic, when people pay directly to their state government, they watch more closely and demand more results. And the state government cannot say things like, oh, we can't do that because the federal government has not yet given us money. Common sense. You see, leverage exists in this case because leaders are focused on responding to the needs of the common man, and this produces economic fairness for the citizens as they finally enjoy the dividends of democracy. So once again, my lords, may I, if I may, decentralization enables a balance between joint action and state independence. In successful federations like the United States and Germany, decentralization has been shown to coexist with stronger states and national policies in areas of security and finance. And this is allowed and provided for in the Nigerian Constitution per the concurrent legislative list. Logic, this means that decentralization is not about weakening the center, it's about strengthening the states. One last time, my lords, may I, if I may, I rest my case.
All right, still in the debate spirit, please make welcome the first speaker from the Faculty of Nursing, in person of Olalere Oyinkosola.
Twerk your body, twerk your body, oh yeah, hello, madam, you are hot, she feeling cup, summer cup, hello, papa mi fapo, papa mi shayo, 247 oh baby, sọ̀rọ̀ fún mi, sọ̀rọ̀ pa, jẹ́rọ náà lẹ́rọ fi ṣe fàájì o, sáré máa yí wọ́n rí lọ́kàn sí pàdé.
I, Olalere Oyinkosola Elizabeth, pledge to Nigeria, my country. This is not just a statement of loyalty, but a commitment to truth and fairness. And in truth, decentralizing revenue allocation will not help Nigeria achieve economic fairness. Instead, it poses a danger that undermines our collective progress. According to Britannica, decentralization is simply defined as the transfer of power from a central government to subnational authorities like the state or the local government. Economic fairness, on the other hand, according to the Oxford reference, is the distribution of resources in such a way that no state or region is disadvantaged. Today, the picture my friends from the best loser faculty have come to paint is that in the University of Ibadan, where all students collectively pay their school fees to the university central account, which is then distributed to the individual faculty. Instead, we should start paying our school fees to our individual faculties' accounts. What this means is that larger faculties, like the Faculty of Clinical Science, benefit more, while lesser faculties benefit less. Is this what you call economic fairness? In less than 5 minutes, I will prove to you why decentralizing revenue allocation will not and can never help Nigeria achieve economic fairness. To be faithful, loyal, and honest, this is a vow every Nigerian aspires to. But in reality, it is almost impossible for states with weak institutional capacity to embody these values in their governance when resources are handed over to such states under decentralization. What we see is not faithfulness to the citizen, not loyalty to national goods, and definitely not honesty in management. Instead, we see mismanagement and corruption. According to the National Bureau of Statistics in 2022, Nigerian states collectively received over 4 trillion naira from the Federal Account Allocation Committee, yet they showed low capital spending and even old workers' salary due to the poor use of funds. Judges, this is already harmful. Now just imagine the greater harm that will occur if the states are allowed to have full control of their money. So you see, we'll only be digging deeper pits that will be difficult to jump and pass. To serve Nigeria with all my strength. Serving Nigeria is not about serving a few region. It is about serving a whole nation. But decentralizing revenue allocation does the exact opposite. We've seen how this played out between 1960 and 1966, when states kept much of their revenue. The West, driven by cocoa, and the East, fed by palm oil, forged ahead. Meanwhile, the North with lesser resources were left behind. That is not service to Nigeria. That is service to a privileged minority. Today, the danger is even greater. According to a 2017 research published by the Science Publication Committee, decades of skilled revenue allocation already weakened Nigeria's socio-economic status. Many states struggle to provide basic education, healthcare, and infrastructure, while stronger states keeps on advancing. The rich gets richer, while the poor gets poorer. True service to our nation involves living all regions together, not creating a first-class and a second-class state. And that is why decentralizing revenue allocation will not bring economic fairness to Nigeria. to defend our unity. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the heartbeat of our nation. But decentralizing revenue allocation does not defend unity, it destroys it. Instead of building fairness, it tears us apart. States start to think me first instead of Nigeria first. They start to hoard resources. They start to deepen ethnic suspicion, and also they start to turn revenues into a weapon of diversion. According to an article published on the cable, the recent tax reform proposals, which seek to share VAT revenue based on contribution, have already drawn sharp criticism from the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission. The Commission warned that such a shift could breach constitutional provisions and disrupt national cohesion as it twists states into deciding over who contributes more and who contributes less. My opponent might come here to argue that decentralization makes states more responsible, but we must understand that responsibility does not automatically come with more money. Instead, it comes with strong governance structure. States already mismanage the funds they receive from the government. Now imagine what will happen if the states are allowed to have full control of their money. So you see, what Nigeria truly needs is strong governance structure to help build institutional capacity, to help the states deliver development. Also, they might come here to argue that decentralization promotes local development, since these states know their needs better than the government. But according to the Nigerian Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, the federal government already allocates these revenues based on factors like population, land mass, and tailored to meet the specific needs of the state. So, clinical sciences, say with me, I pledge to Nigeria, my country. So help you God. Amen.
Faculty of Nursing, appreciate your speaker once again.
Initiating rage process.
I'm on a belay. They know they see.
Yes, thank you so much. The irony, a best loser calling the other one best loser. Yes, now, am I lying? No. All right. Still on the topic. Will decentralizing revenue allocation help Nigeria achieve economic fairness? Will decentralizing revenue allocation help Nigeria achieve economic fairness? Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome with me the second speaker from the Faculty of Clinical Sciences, Moboluware Ogunleye.
Kò ṣe pé o 247 mi adé.
These nurses have arrived at today's debate making one crucial mistake, failing to learn from the past opponents of the Faculty of Clinical Sciences. So allow me to decentralize their weak arguments using corrections from all of our previous Jawwar rounds. First, my opponents claim that Nigeria's oil dependency requires a strong federal center. But just like the Faculty of Economics in the first round, they have fallen victim to two fallacies. One, hasty generalization, and two, status quo bias. According to a February 25, 2025 Punch newspaper article, oil contributes to less than 6% of Nigeria's total GDP, while non-oil sectors contribute more than 92%. So using oil as an excuse for centralization is simply lazy reasoning. Also, the status quo is failing us. Central core has led to overdependence, mismanagement, and abuse. Decentralization, on the other hand, encourages states to diversify beyond oil. So you see, even if you take their points to the gym, it still can't work out. Moving on, my opponents have also claimed that state governments lack the capacity for effective revenue management. But like our friends from science in the round of 10, they've caught themselves in a logical loop. Assuming that responsibility does not follow capacity is simply ignoring reality. Audience, states lack capacity because the federal government has systematically denied them meaningful responsibilities and resources. As at 2022, the World Bank reported that states finance over 70% of basic education funding, yet they receive less than 50% from the federal government. When more resources come in, it's only logical that the states' capacities would rise alongside. So once again, like the scientists, let's do the maths. Responsibility minus resources equals suffering, something my opponents will be familiar with after losing today. Additionally, they have also argued that decentralization triggers devastating ethnic and regional conflicts. Nurses, like you did in the last round, you have confused the medicine with the poison. But don't worry, the doctors are here. Decentralization does not create conflict. It merely manages it. Judges by the IWGIA. India has over 705 ethnic groups, while Nigeria has about 250. Yet, India has made this policy work. So you see, the real threat is over centralization, which fuels resentment when Abuja holds power. And if you need more evidence, look at the Niger Delta and the peace that followed after the introduction of the 13% derivation funds. Finally, Nigeria is currently facing devastating economical crisis, and the solution is obviously decentralization, because we have urgent needs that require urgent reforms. According to Business Insider Africa, 75.5% of rural Nigerians are currently living in poverty. Inflation is at an all-time high. And any solution, and as the past 8 minutes from clinical sciences have shown you, any solution or reforms that will be made under centralization are better and faster under decentralization. Why? Because decentralization cuts out all the bureaucracy and compromise that the status quo brings. Simply put, bye-bye to waiting on Abuja for every major financial transaction. In conclusion, dear audience, let us take notes when my opponent said, and I quote, "It doesn't matter. See you in the finals."
Faculty of Clinical Sciences. That was good. All right, thank you so much. Before I call on the next speaker, I would like us to, each and every one of us, to check on your colleagues and friends from Faculty of Economics, Faculty of Science. I mean, they got hit by stray bullets. So please check up on them. All right, ladies and gentlemen, calling up the next speaker, the second speaker all the way from the Faculty of Nursing. Please make welcome none other than Olusoga Beatrice.
Make that push. I'm gonna say you take care if I know see.
Audience, the question in today's debate has only one answer. No, economic fairness relies on promoting just and balanced economic system. My opponents, in their shallow understanding of today's topic, have come to argue that decentralization of revenue allocation helps achieve economic fairness in Nigeria. That is why we will need intervention of 2 sociologists to reveal that decentralization prevents economic fairness and even breaks accountability. First, intervention of Takot person. This functionalist view teaches that fairness in society achieved only when every unit can perform its role efficiently. Applying this to Nigeria, decentralizing revenue allocation creates an illusion of independence. Because most states lack adequate resources to function. Economic fairness preaches a balanced economic system. Yet, in some states, the Federal Account Allocation Committee's revenue accounts for over 90% of the total income available for budget funding, indicating level of vulnerability as reported by the Guardian. Judges, this dependency stifles genuine independence, establishes systemic inefficiencies, and even perpetuates unequal development across the country. If revenue control is decentralized, these states will be unable to deliver education, healthcare, or infrastructure, leaving millions
excluded. So you see, decentralization brings dysfunction rather than economic fairness. Now, second sociologist, Max Weber argued that accountability requires clear bureaucratic structures and centralized oversight, but decentralizing revenue allocation in Nigeria would fracture that order, creating 36 different fiscal authorities with weak checks. The problem is evident today. Federal Auditor General's Office scrutinized the Ministry of Labour and Employment for managing public funds and failing to provide credible evidence of financial expenses totaling 3.2 billion naira in 2020, as reported by the Premium Times. Ladies, gentlemen, accountability is already weak under one central structure. How much worse will it be when power is scattered across states with minimal oversight? Instead of decentralization, Nigeria should strengthen institutions with clear rules and effective supervision to ensure fairness, close loopholes, and enforce accountability at all levels of government. My opponents might argue that decentralization gives local entities more autonomy and respect. However, autonomy is not just based on allocation of revenues, but rather on its utilization. A 2023 publication by The Guardian shows that the 774 local governments from the Federal Allocation Accounts Committee received a cumulated 9.56 trillion naira between 2019 and 2023. Despite the funds, performances at local councils remain grossly unsatisfactory. In conclusion, my opponents cannot see it because of the 100 days of darkness.
Please put your hands together from the Faculty of Nursing. Hey, I know we've not had the rebuttal round yet, but who do you think is going to win? Clinical nursing? 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 Good, good. Nursing, please have some faith, have some hope. You just might win. All right, ladies and gentlemen, for the rebuttal round, please welcome with me the second speaker from the Faculty of Clinical Sciences, Mopoluwari Oguleye.
Back to back, you got me, yeah. I ain't scatter my function. When I see you, mama pasha. Ooh, on juice. Man, I never tongue with you, brother, on you. All eyes on you. Me, I wonder.
I pledge to Nigeria. More importantly, I pledge to logic. Unlike my opponents who claim that, one, minority regions will be marginalized. However, decentralization works by ensuring minority rights are protected through measures like subnational taxes. Also, we've shown how even in countries with larger ethnic groups and more diversity like India, it worked. So feasibility is not a concern. They also claim it worsens corruptions. However, one, it ignores the status quo of increasing corruption. Two, in reality, we have actually seen more interest and accountability from citizens when policies are closer to home because the effect is more direct. Nurses, please pledge to logic. Finally, they centered their entire debate on the assumption that states and the federal government won't work together afterwards. However, that ignores how decentralization works with policies like infrastructure development, meaning like Liverpool, nobody works alone. That is, synergy for progress across board. In conclusion, dear nurses, take this medicine and sin no more.
And without further ado, please make welcome the speaker for this report around from the Faculty of Nursing, Olalere Oyinkosola.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Clinical Sciences had just one job today to tell us that revenue decentralization will help achieve economic fairness. Yet they have only argued that decentralization gives them more control over their own resources. However, the World Bank in 2022 confirms that decentralization only increases corruption as only some few powerful individuals will control funds. They have also argued that decentralization equals equalization. But to have already established that resource-rich states benefit more from decentralization because they can generate higher revenue, they also argue that decentralization reduces regional disparity and increases development. development. However, in reality, decentralization often worsens disparity because wealthier states and regions benefit faster and advance faster while poorer ones lag behind. Clinical sciences, you have tried. Today is the end of the world for you. We will be sending love and kisses from ICC.
Now, who do you think is winning?
Do you think nursing is winning? Yes? Yes? No? No? We'll see by the end of the round. All right. Moving on to the next round of debates. This round is highly anticipated, I must say. Between the Faculty of Law and the Faculty of Education.
The mother of all faculties.
All right. The topic for this round is, should the rights of a people to secession be fundamental in a democracy? Once again, the topic for this round is, should the rights of a people to secession be fundamental in a democracy? Now, calling on the first speaker from the Faculty of Law, please put your hands together for Idowu Ademola.
Ẹ má fagilé tí wọ́n gbọ́ ò, kẹ́ má fi wèrè wé mi. Ẹni bá lò ló lè mọ̀, àbó lè ṣàlàyé mi. Báwọn ọmọ bẹ́ta ti pọ̀, kíbi ọmọ mi tó bá ń bọ̀. Lókè lókè la máa lọ, ẹ̀rí pé balẹ̀ ṣága ìyàtọ̀. Bébí wà ọkọ̀.
Ladies and gentlemen, to begin this debate, it is fundamental to fund our mental understanding on this fundamental legal topic. 1. Secession, democracy. This is a legal topic. So, fundamental here is not a regular English word. Fundamental right is a legal term, and according to the United Nations, it means a right that is legally recognized by a state. 2. This debate is not about whether secessions are good or bad. No, it's about whether there should be a fundamental right to secession in a democracy. 3. The people in this motion is not the plural of person. So, when my opponents come here to argue that people could mean 3 persons, a family, or even a department in the Faculty of Education, that is strawman fallacy. According to the United Nations, a people is a distinct, identifiable society with a common culture, language, and history. Now, because secession is like living a marriage, I would lead you across 5 stages in a romantic relationship. Stage 1, the talking stage. Aside idle talks, this is when you ask important questions, like what the person stands for. Audience, the right to secede is colossally important to a democracy. I will explain. According to Amnesty International, a democracy is the rule of the people. It means the state answers to the people. So it's not about whether secession is convenient or costly. It's about whether a democracy can even be democratic if it denies the people the ultimate right to withdraw their mandate. That is logically inconsistent. Denying the people the power to determine their political destiny when their choice is clear, unequivocal, and even overwhelmingly supported. No, educators, you call that autocracy, not democracy. Stage 2, the win stage. At this stage, you stay diligent till you get a yes. This diligence, just a bit of it, would have made my opponent realize that recognizing the right to secede would prevent violence in secessions. Having studied 150 ethnic conflicts, the Journal of Democracy declared that violent secessions are less likely to happen in states that recognize secession. Now,
My opponents would make a fundamental error in this debate, and that is assuming that not recognizing secession would prevent secessions. Very false. In fact, according to Al Jazeera in 2019, it only brings it to the underground, making violence the only option, and thus more bloody. So 2 options. A, deny the right, but it doesn't stop it. It only guarantees violence. B, grants the right and prevents violence. Ladies and gentlemen, which is the better option? A or B? 3, dating. 3, dating. At this stage, the relationship has sailed, and so there's stability. Now, my opponents may argue that granting the right to secession would lead to instability because any people can wake up any day and secede. Faculty of Education, when you don't know something, you ask questions, not just jump into conclusion. When we say to grant a right, it is logically implied that enjoying that right comes with regulations. The law states how, when, and how to enjoy that right, and that does not make the right any less fundamental. For instance, voting is a fundamental right in Nigeria, but you must be 18. You must be sane. You must even be accredited. These are just legal requirements to ensure that that right is not abused. So logically, even the right to concede also comes with conditions. But if my opponent comes here to argue that fundamental should mean unrestricted, forgive them, for they know not what they say. Stage 4, marriage. Till death do us part. But what happens when your spouse becomes the agent of death to unalive you? Audience, denying the right to secession leaves the possibility of continuous oppression. It's like locking a person in a cage and throwing the keys in an ocean, or compelling a person to remain in an abusive relationship. To compel people to remain in a political order when their only options are silence or violence. No, that cannot be democracy. That is domination. Stage 5, marital conflict, arguments, counter-arguments. My opponents may argue that the territorial integrity right may make sure that a person does not secede from a nation. They may even quote the international law principle, pacta sunt servanda, meaning let the agreement stand. Education students, I don't know the law students that told you that, but you didn't listen to the end. Because the other half of that maxim is recus sis tantibus, meaning provided that all things remain as they were. If you enter into an agreement with someone and they renege on their part, then you have the legal right to renege on the agreement as well. It's not even deep. It's just common sense. In conclusion, Faculty of Education. Well, you can try again next year. From the Faculty of Law, my name is Idowu Ademola Faith.
All right. The pressure is getting Owesago. All right. Moving on to the Faculty of Education. Are you ready? The first speaker from the Faculty of Education, a round of applause for Bolariwa Israel.
To fund a mental discourse like this, reasoning is fundamental. So opponents, stop internalizing your speeches. Take a pause and reason along. To reason, we must understand. To understand, Britannica defines secession as an act of separating from a state or nation and becoming independent.
Then the Cambridge Dictionary defines fundamental as being the most basic or most important thing on which other things depend. For instance, these walls are fundamental to the existence of this building, without which the building does not exist. This is how fundamental rights are to a democracy. Come, let us reason together. And no matter what game this law student try to play with the law today, a fundamental right is universal, meaning it applies to everyone, everywhere, just by being human. According to the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights, fundamental rights are the inherent dignity, equal, and unremovable right of every member of the human family. The right to secession is not permanent, it is only conditional. These rights are permanent and their existence to the fundamental existence of a democracy. But my opponents have argued that secession might, but it's not conditional, it is permanent. These rights, for instance, these words are fundamental to the existence of a democracy, but secession is not. Audience, for instance, secession is not a fundamental right. It exists. For instance, divorce is an existing democratic right, but not fundamental. Because while it might be needed in certain cases, it is not crucial to survival, since not everyone is married, and not every marriage requires divorce. In the same way, not every democracy requires secession. So opponents, stop, pause, and reason along. Audience, moving on. When we reason together, we understand that a fundamental right entails permanence. Even when it is restricted, its existence is not destroyed. The right to life, for instance, may be restricted under very narrow circumstances, like lawful self-defense or armed conflict. But then, the right itself continues to exist, as it is recognized everywhere, for everyone, at every time. Secession, on the other hand, is not permanent, but conditional. It only emerges when the basic foundation of democracy has collapsed. The United Nations Charter of 1945 emphasizes and affirms the right of people to self-determination, mainly in situations of colonial domination or severe oppression, not as an everyday entitlement within stable democracies. Fundamental rights are constant, and they form the basis of a democracy, without which democracy is void. By nature and structure, secession only becomes a last resort when all these are trampled on. And in the absence of this, it disappears. So opponent, take a pause and reason along. Again, when we reason together, we understand that something that is fundamental to a system must sustain that system. This is why Article 17 of the European Convention on Human Rights makes it clear that no right may be interpreted in a way that destroys the very framework of right and freedom. Fundamental rights, like life and speech, are permanent pillars that coexist with a democracy. And without them, democracy is void. Secession, on the other hand, does the exact opposite. By nature, it is meant to lead to a disintegration, which may only become necessary in cases where other remedies are failed, but not fundamental. For instance, that is a fire extinguisher here. We pray not to need it, but if flames break out, we have to use it. The extinguisher becomes necessary in such an emergency case, but can never be called fundamental to the running of the classroom activities. Opponent, again, take a pause and reason along. Audience, our opponents have tried to test your reasoning by arguing that if secession becomes fundamental, then the government might want to govern better out of fear. But sincerely, we have no reason to reason about such arguments. It is just like arguing that a husband will stay faithful to his wife just because he's afraid that she can leave anytime. That might hold him in check for a while, but it is obviously not love. In the same way, democracy cannot stand on the fear of secession, because when fear is the foundation, collapse is only a matter of time. A true fundamental right does not have to depend on scaring anyone. It carries its power naturally. Again, they argued by saying that fundamental rights can be restricted, so secession could also be made fundamental with similar limits. But audience, tell them to take a pause. We only restrict what is already in practice. The right to movement is constant but restricted during curfews. These rights exist first, then limits are drawn around them. Secession, on the other hand, is not constant, but it is not continuous, but a one-time disruption, so it cannot be restricted in the same sense. Opponents, even if it requires approval before it can happen, then it stops being fundamental eventually. In conclusion, this is how far reasoning has brought us. Opponents, one last pause. You've done so well for yourselves, but this is where the journey ends. Audience, as they take a pause, give them a round of applause.
Pressure, pressure. Everywhere I look, there is pressure. But who is the pressure on? Who is the pressure on? Law? Education? All right. It's still the round between Faculty of Law and Faculty of Education, and the topic still is, should the rights of a people to secession be fundamental in a democracy? Please, with a resounding round of applause, welcome the second speaker from the Faculty of Law in person of Akilawo Goodluck.
The race to a sustainable democracy requires that every right which preserves liberty must be fundamental. So, Faculty of Education, lay down your arms and lend me your ears. In the next 3 minutes, let's run this race together so you can decide whether it is limiting people's freedoms or recognizing their rights that indeed preserves democracy. First, the starting line. To start this race, there is a thin line between peace and war. Judges, for any democracy to walk this thin line, the right of a people to secede must definitely be fundamental. You see, when people know that they can live peacefully without necessarily resorting to civil wars, true representation is guaranteed. According to an American political science review, in an article titled How Civil Wars Ended, half of civil wars worldwide starts from blocked secessionist demands. So you see that recognizing the right of a people to secede is the first step to ending civil wars. My opponents will say this only exists in a utopic world, that people won't just drop their guns because the constitution allows it. But that is exactly the point. You see, we are debating democracy in its ideal form, a system that is built on consent, not coercion. If true democracy is being upheld, then a peaceful exit must be guaranteed. Otherwise, it is simply a demo, not a democracy. Second, the race itself. Audience, you need to realize that democracy runs on one major fuel: legitimacy. According to the United Nations, a government's authority to rule in a democracy must be backed by the people's recognition of that authority. So if the government does not recognize the people's right to live, why should the people recognize such a government's authority to rule in the first place? My opponents would argue that accepting this would lead to anarchy, since every group that rejects the government authority can use it as a form of blackmail. Faculty of Education, kindly re-educate yourself on fallacies before you attempt to lecture us on logic. That conclusion you would have had is called hasty generalization, because making a right fundamental does not inherently imply its misuse or arbitrariness in any form. Besides, the laid down rules on the right in question absolutely demolishes that rebuttal argument. Finally, the finish line. To finish this race, democracy must pass the ultimate test of accountability, because its purpose is to guard people against injustice and dictatorships. My opponents choose to call it fear, but reality calls it accountability. For example, if TLDS constituencies have no choice but to remain in Jawwar, then improving the standard might not necessarily be a compulsory concern for Asiwaju, our president. However, when he knows that all constituencies can jointly step away, he would have no choice but to improve the standard of the event. So you see that when people can step out, leaders are forced to step up. In conclusion, since today's debate is about exit from a democracy, Faculty of Education, how would you like to exit this year's Jawwar? That exit or this one?
Jawwar 2025. You are not speaking up. But yeah, the way you are not speaking up, your speakers too will be going through that exit. Jawwar 2025. I only hear people like education. Jawwar 2025. I have known that most people here, they are going home today. So, for the next speaker, coming from the Faculty of Education, please, a round of applause for Uwokori Faith.
Attention, attention. In this debate, there is one thing more expensive than your money: your attention. So, audience, pay attention. First, we've established that secession is a right that comes in as a last resort in extreme cases. When it is elevated to a fundamental right, all that is left is a constant possibility for fragmentation. This is not right for a democracy. I mean, Volume 40, Issue 2 of the Cardozo Law Review, in its findings, shows that the easier it is to leave a community, the less likely it is that people will attempt to bring collective change from within. It is so simple. The notion of loyalty and unity cannot thrive in an environment where the thought of living is just one step away. It's just one step away. It is then ironic that the democracy that my opponents claim to try to build will come crashing down with secession as a fundamental right. When you make it easier to break apart, then it becomes more harder for everyone to be a part. But audience, our opponent might have argued that the highest form of democracy is self-determination and expression, and this is what secession provides. But that only shows that they were not paying attention. We are not arguing against the right to secede. What we are saying is not to make it a fundamental right, because it gives room for a constant possibility to tear apart at the slightest provocation. Imagine the Faculty of Law deciding to break from TLDS just because we beat them in today's debate. This room for such constant possibility as the slightest provocation destroys the stability of democracy. Attention, attention. Audience, secession fractures economies. Its impact runs across shared markets, currencies, industries, and investments that thrive on stability. According to an article titled The Economic Impact of Secession by the Center for Inclusive Trade Policy, secession generally leads to significant negative economic outcomes for both the seceding and successor regions. It is so simple. Just the talk of secession can drive away investors, and it can also reduce economic growth. Now, making it a fundamental right turns that mere possibility into a permanent attribute of national life. So what ought to be a rare event becomes an everyday risk that has to be factored into every economic decision. And in economics, risks manifest in forms of higher cost, reduced investment, and slower growth. Therefore, making secession fundamental is not just an elevation of rights. It cements economic uncertainties, and nations pay the price of instability, even when no one has seceded. Judges, why we pay attention? Our opponents, out of tension, might have argued the illusion and evil of democracy, and how secession as a fundamental right then becomes the ultimate escape route. But this debate isn't about the perfection of democracy, but about what can be called fundamental within it. We all agree that every system has its flaws. Democracy is still the framework that we stand on, and every fundamentals within it must sustain it. In conclusion, audience, judges, thank you for your attention.
Attention, attention, if you're not spending, place priority. Can be broke, can be lazy. I said nobody go on the high seas. My money be like cocoa money. See now everything I go. Bitch better have my money.
Thank you so much. While the second speaker from Faculty of Education was speaking, we had joined us this evening the All Warden of Alexander Brown Hall, Dr. Obioma Uchendu. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, sir. Round, please make welcome from the Faculty of Law, Akinlawo, good luck.
No time for bants, straight to business. They argue that democracy cannot stand when fear is used as a foundation. But there's a difference between fear and holding your leaders accountable. So equating fear to responsibility is simply lazy argument. They also made the fundamental mistake of defining fundamental in this debate as a universal right of all humans. But there's a difference between a right and a fundamental right. If it is inherently yours, it is human right. If your laws and constitution recognize it, then it becomes a fundamental right duly recognized. So education, our LLT is just a stone throw away. You can come around for lectures. They argue that the right to secession should not be fundamental because not everyone needs the right. And so it cannot be fundamental to every democracy. But this is very flawed. I mean, there are many rights that not everybody enjoys. The fact that voting is a fundamental right does not mean everyone in a city necessarily votes. In conclusion, with the quality of arguments from the Faculty of Education tonight, I genuinely fear for the future of education in Nigeria.
All right. Thank you so much. Now welcome in. Thank you so much, members of the audience. Now welcome in the speaker taking the rebuttal round for Faculty of Education. A round of applause for Bolarinwa, Israel.
Faculty of Law, that was so low. We asked you to pay attention, but obviously you did not. A fundamental mistake you made is omitting the word fundamental. No one argued against making secession a right. In fact, we agree that it is right to recognize such right, but we argue against making it fundamental because, like we explained, a fundamental right is universal, applies to everyone everywhere, just by being human. Opponent, listen and pay attention. Opponent, focus. You argue that we can restrict this right, but we already argued that a fundamental right is restricted, but it is only existing first, then restricted later. This decision is not continuous. It only exists once, so it cannot be restricted in the same sense. Faculty of Law, listen and pay attention. Arts, vetmed, social sciences, we've taken law into our hands. See you at ICC.
To the bank, you know the money make a dance, and I'm feeling funky, cause I'm with a couple million lucky, money make the work go round, no do me I want more, a little magic.
Faculty of Law or Faculty of Education? No, I can't. Faculty of Law or Faculty of Education?
I don't even know who is talking.
Hey, interesting. Faculty of Law, Faculty of Education. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are now moving to the all category. Now, this debating category is between one of the alls that successfully completed the remontada and the alls that has consecutively scored 80 plus in different debating rounds. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the debating round between the Nnamdi Azikiwe Hall and the Sultan Bello Hall.
Is it going to be the Baluba or the noble men?
Ladies and gentlemen, the topic to be debated between Zik and Bello tonight is: should African nations implement population control policies to ensure sustainable development? Thank you, Bello, Sultan Bello. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen. The topic to be debated is, should African nations implement population control policies? The topic to be debated properly between both halls, Zeke and Bello, is, should the Nigerian police force be decentralized? Should the Nigerian police force be decentralized? Please make welcome the first speaker from the Nnamdi Azikiwe Hall, in person of Segun Oladejo.
Ladies and gentlemen, for the next few minutes, call me the master of war. I'm using the forces of battle, the vanguard, main forces and rearguard. I will send them home. Before we begin, let us prepare our forces. In 1651, Hobbes proposed a social contract theory which noted that security and order could only be achieved if all citizens would give up all their individual powers to one person in return for protection by specialized agencies like the police. This is a centralized system. But Inyang and Abraham in 2013 observed that as society progresses, this system has proven unfit for combating crime, and it has created room for debate in support of an alternative. The alternative I propose today is the decentralization of the Nigerian police force. Decentralization, according to the World Bank, is defined as the sharing of authority and resources between at least two tiers of government. Now, our forces are set. First things first, the vanguard. Audience, just like the vanguard is the foremost force of battle, a country system of government is the core of its structure. Nigeria is constitutionally a federal state, and it is only logical to expect that the operation of all its features are based on federalism. According to Britannica, among the major principles of a federal system is non-centralization. In fact, our 1999 constitution enshrines power sharing across the ties of government, granting states autonomy in areas like education and health. But centralizing the police force contradicts this when states are given control over their own security, the main essence of societal order. In a true federation, every stratum of the Nigerian government should be granted powers to establish and operate police. For the next few minutes, call me the master of war. And using the forces of battle, the vanguard, main forces and rearguard, I will send them home. But before we begin, let us prepare our forces. In 1651, Hobbes proposed a social contract theory which noted that security and order could only be achieved if all citizens would give up all their individual powers to one person in return for the protection by specialized agencies like the police. This is the definition of a centralized system. But Inyang and Abraham in 2013 observed that as a society progresses, this system has proven unfit for combating crime, and it has created room for debates in support of an alternative. Audience, the alternative I propose today is the decentralization of the Nigerian police force. Decentralization, according to the World Bank, means sharing authority and resources between at least two tiers of government. Now, our forces are set. First things first, the vanguard. Audience, just like the vanguard is the foremost force of battle, a country system of government is the core of its structure. Nigeria is constitutionally a federal state, and it is only logical to expect that the operation of all its features are based off federalism. According to Britannica, among the major principles of a federal system is non-centralization. In fact, Our 1999 constitution enshrines power sharing between the tiers of government, granting state autonomy in areas like education and health. But centralizing the police force contradicts this when states are denied control over their own security, the main essence of societal order. In a true federation, every stratum of the Nigerian government should be granted powers to establish and operate police within their jurisdictions according to known law. The U.S. Department of Justice and the Bureau of Justice Statistics explain that states and local agencies handle most routine criminal enforcement, like murder and property crimes, while federal bodies deal with offenses like terrorism and treason under federal statutes. And in case my opponents come to say, if the centralized police force is not performing optimally, it should be reformed and not decentralized, let them know that our argument today is not that centralization is poorly practiced. It is that the very foundation of centralization is incompatible with the system of governance we practice, which makes its existence in Nigeria flawed. The vanguard has gone forth, deploying the main forces. Audience, the security needs of each state are different. Some states are plagued with urban insurgencies and others with violent attacks from herdsmen. A decentralized system will be structured in such a way that the governors and commissioners of police tailor intelligence and deploy manpower according to the needs of their region, unlike a centralized system that largely makes use of a one-size-fits-all approach, which according to Robert J. Sampson can be harmful in diverse communities because it fails to account for unique local needs. This point is very clear, but to elaborate for the guys below, you see, context policing would allow regional governments to train persons in specific fields unique to the security challenge of a region. For example, Zamfara, stricken with banditry, would require the police force to be trained in small unit counter-insurgency. This would be different from Enugu, which is mostly plagued with gang violence and hence would require their police to be trained in de-escalation and forensic investigation. And this would lead to efficiency. Now we agree that there are indeed special forces in Abuja, but our argument today is that the standby policemen are left defenseless in skills and in other cases, ammunitions. Our main forces are in. Bello is on the low. Finally, the rear guard. It was noted by Margaret Raphael in 2021 that when state governors who are constitutionally chief security officers of their state give orders on security, those are often referred upward to the Inspector General of Police, which slows decisions at the state level. Bureaucracy in the Nigerian police force often leads to confusion and conflict. Incidents like the Magodo standoff of 2022, reported by Arise News, where the Lagos governor's order was ignored in his own state by police in favor of IGP and AGF directives, and the NSAS protest in 2020, where governors admitted lack of control over police in their very own states. This further exposes the absurdity of bureaucracy in a centralized police system. Now, do not get me wrong, bureaucracy might exist in a decentralized system, but it will be reasonable as there will be little chain of command and prevention of jurisdictional clashes, since there would be a bold line between the federal and state police. In conclusion, vanguard above, bellow below.
Place of somebody deliberately putting off the generator outside. Please and please, if you are the one, kindly stop. Please, please. Bello, Zeke, please stop. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, ladies and gentlemen, without wasting much of our time, we are going to the first speaker from the Hall of Noblemen, the Sultan Bello Hall. Please make welcome the first speaker, none other than Babatime Asiwaju.
I know the we go, the fly to Puerto Rico. Oh my mind, oh. I gotta run you up, let me remind you, oh. Oh, baby, I do, boy.
Dear judges, my opponents have spent the last 5 minutes delivering a lecture on the benefits of decentralized policing. And guess what? I actually agree with them. You see, decentralized policing has a lot of benefits that save this timer screen. I would have loved to enumerate. However, one critical detail that they have failed to properly take into account is the context of Nigeria. Because today's debate does not ask if decentralized policing has worked in the United States or any other country where it has shown promise. Dear judges, my opponents have spent the last 5 minutes delivering a lecture on the benefits of decentralized policing. And guess what? I actually agree with them. You see, decentralized policing has a lot of benefits that save this timer. I would have loved to enumerate. However, one critical detail that they have failed to properly take into account is the Nigerian context. Because today's debate does not ask if decentralized policing has worked in the United States or any other country where it has shown promise. It simply asks if the Nigerian police force should be decentralized. Nigeria? That I know? Well, let's find out together. Decentralized policing is defined by the United States Department of Justice as the transfer of control or authority from a central command to local policing units. And in the context of Nigeria, it only makes sense to engage this topic at state level because we simply do not have the governance framework to maintain it at a regional level. And to even discuss it at the local government level would be a ridiculous waste of precious time. Potato, to decentralize policing at local government, state, or regional level, the noblemen from Sultan Bello Hall say, God forbid. Let me show you why. First, the economics does not support it. According to a 2024 budget report, out of 36 states, 34 do not generate enough revenue to cover their expenditure and have to depend on federal government allocation. It is so bad that states like Jigawa, Imo, and Bayelsa need up to 5 times their IGR to stay afloat. Whereas, according to a 2024 Investopedia article titled How Police Departments Are Funded, one major characteristic of decentralized policing is that it is funded by the level of government that runs it. Let me make this abundantly clear, that if you claim to adopt decentralized policing, but still need to depend on federal government allocation to fund your security outfit, what you are running might be hybrid policing, it might be quasi-centralization, but it is definitely not decentralized policing. As such, my opponent's stance can be likened to that one Zikite who still depends on his parents for monthly allocation, but is promising to fund the lifestyle of Precious, our ideal body. Zikite, I know you are used to that lifestyle, but the noblemen from Sultan Bello Hall say, God forbid. Moreover, dear audience, decentralized policing is not an option because state governors have not shown a track record of accountability. According to a February 2025 report by the Premium Times, former governor of Abia State, Orji Kalu, was charged by the EFCC for embezzling 60.85 billion naira. And that is just one of the many, many other similar cases. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, let me use my own former governor, Yaya Bello, as a case study. Former governor Yaya Bello did not pay civil servant salaries for over 11 months and is suspected to have diverted those monies into his purse. Allegedly, of course. But
while the civil servants could still fend off side hustles in a critical sector like policing, it will cripple the security and leave lives and properties exposed to unimaginable risk. And it is why the noblemen from Sultan Bello Hall say, moving on, the state governments do not have the institutional capacity or structure to accommodate decentralized policing. For instance, listen, according to a 2025 report by the United States Department of State, Borno State returned several female insurgency victims back to their Boko Haram husbands because they did not have the institutional capacity to return those victims back to their original families. And according to a 2025 World Bank report, this development, this is the lack of institutional capacity, is the same across many states in Nigeria. But the Zikites want us to continue trusting the state when, regardless of their state, Zikites, the noblemen say, God forbid. At this point, if my opponents come to argue that although we cannot implement decentralized policing now, we should work towards implementing it in the future, please remind them that 3 days ago, Nigeria became a 65-year-old man that now needs solutions that work and not the promise of some fancy future utopia. As I conclude, let me clarify that although we have vehemently opposed decentralized policing, we have not implied that a centralized one is the way to go, ladies and gentlemen. We have other options like hybrid policing and quasi-centralization. So in conclusion, to decentralized policing, we say, God forbid.
Leave keys.
For life,
your first speaker.
I for don't turn visitor. Overstay my welcome, but I for chop full insult.
All right, ladies and gentlemen.
Even my mama joined them.
Still on the topic, should the Nigerian police force be decentralized? Should Nigerian police force be decentralized? Please make welcome the second speaker all the way from the Onamdi Azikiwe, in person of Obirija Somtochukwu.
Black for black for let's get me now. That's a direct to give me a plan. It's you.
Audience, today's debate is a policy debate, and policy debates are not about shaping realities. So when our opponents come here to quote laws as to why status quo exists, tell them we are here to debate what ought to be and not what already is. Basically, the topic asks if it is ideal for the Nigerian police force to be changed from the current highly centralized model to a system in which power is shared to states and possibly local government security outfits. And our answer to this is a resounding yes. My opponents may argue that decentralization will lead to politicization, and therefore we should not decentralize the Nigerian police. We accept that risk, but centralization does not cure politicization either. When the entire force reports up a single chain, officers to the IGP, and the IGP to the president, one person can politicize the whole institution. Centralization concentrates this risk. It does not eliminate it. In fact, the Human Rights Watch documented police were complicit in election-based violence in 2007, where police officers watched while PDP party agents, the party of the then president, intimidate officials. The real problem is not where authority lies, but how authority is checked. The solution is no more centralization, but a creation of independent investigative panels and other institutional checks and balances. That, however, is not what this topic has asked. So if our opponents insist on dragging us into this, it shows that they do not understand this debate. They might also come to say that some states are poor and won't be able to fund their local police force, and that would cause imbalance in standards across states. Listen, intelligent audience. Most federations in which state and local police are practiced do not leave funding entirely to these states. They use federal grants and conditional transfers to level capacity. For example, according to the Bureau of Justice, the United States provides federal DOJ formulas and discretional grants to states and local forces. In Belgium, the Brussels Times reported that federal government supplements local state police budgets. Here in Nigeria, we already have the FAAC and the Nigerian Police Trust Banks. This helps to get states that need this financial support their needs, and this helps them prevent unfair standardization across states. Lastly, if the noblemen from Sultan Bello Hall come and make an ignoble argument by saying that we have debated for the dissolution of the center, I would like to say that decentralization is not the dissolution of the center. In primary school, we were taught that division of labor makes work easier and faster, and that was what we have come to say. The great men of Nnamdi Azikiwe are saying that the center stays but focuses on main duties like terrorism, cross-border crime, and national standardization, while states are given the power to do day-to-day policing, recruit and deploy troops, and policies that factor in their realities. And that is what decentralization is all about. Go!
Please put your hands together for the second speaker from the Nnamdi Azikiwe. Ladies and gentlemen, are you sure? You just might go to Zico. Okay now. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Zeke. Don't worry, you get your Jawwar on the way to Zeke Hall. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the second speaker from the Sultan Bello Hall in person of Philade Michael.
Ladies and gentlemen, no time for theatrics, straight to the Jawwar classroom. Using 3 subjects, I will educate these Zikites on why the Nigerian police force should not be decentralized. Subject 1, history. George Santayana once said, those who fail to learn from the past are doomed to repeat it. And as we do not want to repeat the follies of our ancestors, let us take a walk through history. The year is 1966, and a panel under then General Agu Irirosi's regime just recommended the disbandment of the then Nigerian Regional Police Force. Their reason? Trigger happy officers who were used for partisan political processes and the oppressions of Nigerians by rulers of the then Northern and Western region, as reported by a This Day article titled The History of Policing in Nigeria. Audience, this might seem like a long time ago, but as a famous quote says, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is nothing but insanity. The very idea of a decentralized police force in Nigeria is like a dead bird, even when attached to a Zig kite, can only fly among Z kites. Subject 2, civic education. Judges, the crux of my opponent's argument is that due to Nigeria's diversity, decentralization is ideal. However, reality shows that decentralization in an heterogeneous country, such as Nigeria, stokes the fire for ethno-religious conflicts. For instance, a 2024 publication by the Latin American Research Review showed that in Mexico, a clash between the state police and the communal police over indigenous differences led to the death of over 200 innocent civilians. This was also the case in the Shia and Sunni police force in Lebanon, which resulted in the death of over hundreds, as reported by a 2008 Al Jazeera publication. Audience, even a blind man can see how this would play out in Nigeria. The state police become terror forces that enforce ethnic and religious supremacy across states. Subject 3, government. Judges, my opponents have argued that decentralization is a key element of a federal system, citing examples like the United States of America. Beautiful attempt at cherry picking. I am almost tempted to ask the sons of Azikiwe,
On a scale of logic, how much does Zeke weigh? This is because there are several other countries with similar federal structures like Nigeria where this did not work. We might as well cherry-pick India, which resulted in enforcing a central reserve police force due to the inability of the state police to effectively undo crime, as reported by the Central Reserve Police Force Index. So when they come with their fallacy of hasty generalization, remember, the context is Nigeria, and Nigeria does not have the systems to deal with a decentralized police force. In conclusion, audience, I have shown beyond I have shown that decentralization cannot and will not work in Nigeria. As for the sons of Azikiwe, let us show you the way out of Jawwar.
Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together. Sultan Bello Hall. Hey, Azikiwe, let's go. Azikiwe, the way. Thank you so much, Bello. All right, ladies and gentlemen, for Zico, thank you. For the rebuttal round between Nnamdi Azikiwe Hall and Sultan Bello Hall, please make welcome the first speaker from the Nnamdi Azikiwe Hall, Segun Oladejo.
Follow you again, Kilo, follow you again. Now I know they follow you again, Kilo, follow you again. Now I know they follow you again, follow you again. Now I know they focus.
Audience, my opponent said that we do not have what it takes to manage regional policing and stated the funding problem, blah blah. Thus, this shows just one thing. Now, my opponent does not understand the definition of the first term in today's topic, should. Today's debate is not asking can or ability to, but rather if it is the ideal, as you argue. The Ethiopia you spoke against is the very thing today's topic is asking for. Also, ladies and gentlemen, Nigeria is a federal state, and according to the UNDP working paper framework for decentralized policies and local development strategies, the functions expected to be devolved or shared in a federation include education, health, police, and civil defense. In other words, every true federation is expected to decentralize these sectors. Anything less falls short of genuine federal practice and becomes something else. In conclusion, Bello, come they go.
The first speaker from Nnamdi Azikiwe Hall, and to be taking the rebuttal from Sultan Bello Hall is the first speaker, El President of Babatimei Ashewaju.
I could be a mind in a million ways.
Straight to business. First, my opponents have come to commit a black and white fallacy, as they made it look like opposing decentralization automatically means supporting centralization. However, there are several alternatives, like we have earlier proposed. Secondly, my opponent said something about Inyang and Abraham introducing decentralization. I don't know who Inyang and Abraham are, but if they came to my Nigeria, they will agree with my stance in today's debate. As expected, my opponents argue that Nigeria should adopt a decentralized police system because it is the best fit for a federal system. However, we already stated that while it may work in a developed state like the US, it has failed woefully in other federal countries with almost similar structures to Nigeria, such as India. Jasper, one would think that after spending so much time with me, you would have learnt logic. I still have more to teach you. Then, my opponents came to say that federal government can supplement state government budget. I agree, but in the case where the federal government shoulders most of the bill, I mean, that is no longer decentralized policing. And then finally, Shagun came to tell me something about utopias. At Jawwar, we don't debate utopias, we debate actual solutions.
Ladies and gentlemen,
money talking about this on my head.
Hey.
No think it is on my head. No gonna. I can balance on the reserve of the politicians.
Zeke or Bello?
You know the show up for Insta. Scatter the talk will be
Zeke or Bello? Hey, once again, Zeke or Bello? Okay, wait. Maybe it's the other way around. Bello or Zeke? Amazing.
Nnamdi Azikiwe, have you seen the way now? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh my God. Moving on to the next round of debate between Alexander Brown Hall.
Thank you so much, Zeke.
At the end of the day, you might just see your way out of Jawwar.
Zeke, thank you.
We see you. Thank you very much. Now, moving on to the round between Alexander Brown Hall and the only standing female hall in the competition.
Yes.
Queen
Idia
Idia
Hall.
Hall. The topic for this round of debate is: should African nations implement population control development? Once again, the topic for this round of debate is: should African nations implement population control policies to ensure sustainable development? And going up first is Alexander Brown Hall. Please, with a resounding round of applause, welcome the first speaker, Ayo James.
One, two.
I better pass me my cup. I just want to have fun. I know I worry too much. I don't dey gather my funds. Me and my guys they on soft. If you dey hate, it no be my fault. Better wait for your turn. Oh, I'm dripping. Below water Fiji.
There might be a temptation to restrict population control policies to mean a one or two child policies, like what happened in China, where citizens were forced to give birth to a certain number of children among under drastic measures. Intellectual audience, when the idiots come here to make this mistake, please listen to them. They've come a long way, but let them know they have come the wrong way. According to the UN 2021 World Population Control Policies, population policies are policies that are designed to manage the population, the growth rate and size of a population. This includes everything from family planning policies, immigration policies, and immigration policies, amongst others. The UNFPA also reports that there are 4 levels of demographic transition. Now, most of the world are in stage 3 and 4, which involves low death rate and low birth rate. On the other hand, most African countries are in stage 1, which involves high death rate and high birth rate. Simply put, we are giving birth to too many children, far more than the rest of the world, while simultaneously dying at a very high rate, unable to even take care of these children, and are stuck in an endless cycle of poverty, resource scarcity, and environmental degradation. Today's debate is essentially asking if we should embrace progress and move on with the rest of the world to make changes in our healthcare, in our welfare, and other societal policies to prevent our people from dying, and also to ensure we only give birth to children we can take care of. Judges, African nations should implement population control policies because they guarantee better healthcare services. According to a 2025 paper published on oxfordbibliographies.com, the only way to achieve population control is to provide better healthcare. Just like we saw with Japan, when they implemented the population control policy as reported by the World Bank. It is simple. With better healthcare, you will have less people dying before their time. infant mortality will be greatly reduced as mothers will live longer and our hospitals will work better. And when mothers are alive to breastfeed their infant children, childhood starvation and severe malnutrition will be a thing of the past. With this, we achieve zero hunger and good health, SDGs 2 and 3. So you see, population control policies are essentially for our development and should definitely be our priority. Res ipsa loquitur. The fact speaks for itself. Audience, migration policies are essentially population control policies and are crucial in the economic development of African nations. With unemployment rates greater than 50% in some African countries, according to Statista, Africa will be hard-pressed to generate sufficient jobs to reach their target for economic growth, according to the World Bank. So it only makes sense for these countries to have tight immigration principles that prevent illegal immigrants from coming in to use up their available resources. My opponents may argue that population control policies are historically linked with human rights abuse. However, it has never been wise to throw the baby out with the bathwater. While there are few instances of human rights abuse in the past, in many countries that have implemented the population control policies, consent is a central concept that helps to champion the right of citizens to ensure they make better healthcare services and prevent the possibilities of abuse. Judges, my opponents might also argue that there are alternatives to population control policies. However, that argument is like a basket. It cannot hold water. Population control policies are not essentially about reducing fertility rates. However, and it is illogical to want to achieve control by leaving things to chance. No, control comes by deliberate plans and action. My opponents might also argue that governments may face a cultural backlash from African communities that prioritize fertility. However, culture is a dynamic thing, and we have also shown that most African countries have already implemented these population principles. Audience, if African communities implement population control principles, we will not even be the only one. According to the UN, over 120 countries already have one population control principles or the other, and the results have been remarkable, including 35 out of 48 countries. Apparently, just like Ashake will say, others are wise, but my opponents over-wise. In conclusion, my opponents might also point out China's example to point out the violation of human rights like forced abortion and sterilization. But that is what philosophers will call a strawman's fallacy. It is an attempt to deceive us by painting the worst possible example. Population control policies are neither it is tailored to specific needs of individuals. Finally, dear idiots, see you next year.
Welcome to the African Union General Assembly. Today, we deliberated whether African countries should implement population control policies to ensure sustainable development. Our verdict, a resounding no. According to the Fiveable Library, population control policies are strategies implemented by government organizations to regulate the growth and distribution of a population. These policies include family planning services, education or reproductive health, incentives or disincentives for childbirth. Now, sustainable development is the development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to achieve their own needs, as defined by the World Commission on Environment and Development. Beyond these definitions, they identified 3 pillars that must occur simultaneously to achieve sustainable development. Pillar by pillar, I would explain how Africa cannot achieve sustainable development using population control policies. Pillar 1, economic growth. Let's make this clear. According to Agri-Food Network, Africa has historically had low population density, which slowed growth when compared to Europe and Asia. Even today, with population growth accelerating from lower mortality rates, sub-Saharan Africa's density remains far below Europe and Asia. And since overpopulation is related to food production, Africa's current density shows it is not overpopulated. In case my opponent didn't get that, let me repeat it again, loud and clear. Africa is not overpopulated. Hence, no need for population control policies. This is why we see the African Catalyst state that inadequate infrastructure remains a major obstacle towards Africa achieving its full economic growth potential. Also, the Economic Commission for Africa indicates that Africa's infrastructure deficit reduces economic growth by 2% annually and cost productivity by up to 40%. Audience, it is clear that Africa does not face a population problem, rather a structure problem. And just like every good speech needs a good structure, so does Africa, not population control policies. Pillar 2, social inclusion. Population control policies do not oppose social inclusions, they undermine them. By nature, they strip group of their rights, from women being denied reproductive rights, as seen in China during the one-child policy from 1979 to 2015 through forced abortion and sterilization, as documented by the Human Rights Watch, to poor families being targeted disproportionately. In India, during the emergency period of 1975 to 1977, over 8 million sterilization procedures occurred within 1 year, with poor families coerced while the rich ones escaped. In apartheid South Africa, family planning targeted the fears of rising black population, as black women were pressured disproportionately, as reported by Kaufman article in Reproductive Control in Apartheid South Africa. A policy that silences the women, punishes the poor, and marginalizes the minorities can never guarantee sustainable development. Pillar 3, environmental protection. Here is the truth. Population control will not protect the environment, as Africa's environmental health has never been threatened by numbers, but by harmful policies, such as fossil fuel dependency and poor waste management, stemming from human choices that drive degradation. Take, for instance, ABH is no stranger to overpopulation, yet they know that the over 100-day power outage that they faced recently was not caused by their crowded rooms, but by certain human choices and poor management. In the same vein, it's not our numbers that endanger the environment, but choices on how we manage them. According to the article, natural resource deficit by ASTI sustainability, just 20% of the world population consumes 80% of the planet's resources. This shows that environmental degradation is about lifestyle, not numbers. Even with fewer people, unchecked harmful habits will still harm the environment. Hence, Africa's path to sustainability lies not in population control, but in promoting sustainable practices. At the assembly, some reservations were raised but silenced. Now, to ensure we are all reformed, let's hear them and see why they won't stand. First, Western murmurs. The West tells us Africa must shrink to survive. Our opponents want us to swallow that blindly. But as I said, Africa is not overpopulated. ACI Africa makes it clear. Africa's problem is not population, but lack of jobs, infrastructure, and vision. So saying population control would enhance sustainable development is not only a myth, it is a fallacy and a typical oversight. The United Nations and African Development Bank agree our people are not a burden. They are our greatest assets. Second, population control is a cure. This is false. They may argue that the real challenge is in implementing these policies in Africa, but that proves my point. If it does not work here, then it cannot bring about sustainable development. And as I factually stated earlier, Africa's problem is not population, but weak systems, poor structures, and failing institutions. In conclusion, it is clear that these three pillars are the determinants of sustainable development, but implementing population control policies have failed on all grounds. Opponents, if you still do not get this,
Kelly, you know me one tap that. All I am is shorty go getting like a rap chat. Cause in my quality.
Thank you. Still, the topic that is being debated is, should African nations implement population control policies to ensure sustainable development? And now, moving on to the second speaker from Alexander Brown Hall. Please welcome Onyinyechi Osisi Ogu.
That you told me, I'ma finish work, baby, go in. Yeah, you been on my mind lately. We won't forget, boom, boom, now. Yeah.
Queen Idia was known for her wisdom and bravery in battle. And coming into this debate, I assumed that her followers will mirror the same. Sadly, they have failed. So ladies and gentlemen, permit me to take their place as an honorary idiot in this battle of logic. To begin, population control policies empowers African women to be more involved in the workforce, thereby encouraging economic growth. In the 90s, Rwanda implemented the nationwide family planning program to curb overpopulation. This led to a 70% drop in maternal mortality rates between 2002 and 2020, according to the World Bank. Similarly, after Ethiopia introduced its health extension program, maternal deaths dropped by 72% per a 2024 Global Health article. In both instances, this kept mothers who are also teachers, doctors, and traders healthier and in the workforce, contributing to national development. If Queen Idia herself stood for female empowerment, then why do my opponents stand against it? Moving on. Judges, an uncontrolled population is a danger to the environment. My opponents will link these worries to neo-colonial ideology. Idia, please kill that idea. Because despite just contributing 4% to global carbon emissions, Africa suffers the worst health effects of climate change per the World Meteorological Organization. This is worsened by the waste generated by population-dense cities like Lagos, Cairo, and Johannesburg, making population control a must. While improving waste disposal and recycling may seem like the solution, it can only be effective if we reduce the amount of waste generated. Dear opponents, Jawwar is more than just bringing loud supporters to cheer you on. Do you have the resources to win? Speaking of resources, Africa is plagued with a large number of resource deficiencies. Basic economics states that we must increase the means of production. Since that is not feasible, we must then follow the next best step, efficient resource management. That, ladies and gentlemen, is where population control policies come in. Voluntary family planning programs combined with adequate immigration policies can curb overwhelming population surges. This looks like stricter immigration control in northeast Nigeria to conserve security resources, or contraceptive awareness programs in war-torn countries like Congo and Sudan to ensure that children born can be catered for. And when my opponents inevitably come here to state that we're saying only the rich should give birth, remind them of one key word: voluntary. Voluntary. Making use of these facilities is still down to the choice of the citizens. Finally, my opponents will claim that these policies will ruin Africa's youth-dependent economies. ChatGPT, is that you? You see, this argument ignores three major things. One, a large number of youth will create an overbundled educational system, thus requiring population control. Two, what is the point of a youth-led economy in a country with high mortality rates? Again, this requires population control. And three, evidence from countries like Thailand and Bangladesh have found a direct link between reduced fertility rates and increased industrialization, again showing we require population control. In conclusion, dear ladies of Queen Idia, ABH will take it from here.
Asante sana, toro 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 to, ebeji toro 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 to, konabi toro 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 to, ebeji toro 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 toro.
All right, is it still Queen Idia after this? Why did you now take like a second pause? Is it still Queen Idia? ABH, are you getting this? All right, let's go to the second speaker from Queen Idia of welcome, Adeji Praise.
Your eyes shining like bright star. Baby girl, I don't mind. You go be my wife. When you down, you can call on me. I'll be at your door, even if you slump.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Oxford Dictionary defines ensure as to make certain that something will occur or be the case. In other words, guarantee. But can African nations truly guarantee sustainable development through the implementation of population control policies? No. Why? Because there is no future in that direction. And in less than 3 minutes, let's see the reality. First, population control does not guarantee sustainable development. According to an article by the World Bank titled Challenges of African Growth, the real causes of underdevelopment in Africa include poor investment in human capital, weak institutional capacity, and lack of equitable resources. Take, for instance, Nigeria in 1988 adopted a population control policies to reduce fertility rates. Yet, the United Nations Economic Commission has noted no significant development afterwards. Development is not linked to people, fewer people, but strong system, better governance, and inclusive growth. Population control policies is like prescribing medicine to the wrong illness. Africa's real shallowness. It's weak systems and not too many people. So do we focus on reducing the people and ignore fixing the system? No. Is there a future in that direction? No. Second, the population itself is in peril. Judges, consider this. Africa suffers some of the highest infant mortality rates, poor maternal care, rampant infectious diseases, and even poor rural health care access. The UNICEF reports that Africa contributes 70% to maternal mortality rates globally. Microtrends reports 41.59% infant mortality rate in Africa. And the National Library of Medicine recognizes that conditions arising from perinatal period and parasitic diseases are the leading causes of under 5 deaths in Africa. If government shifts their limited focus to population control policies instead of this health crisis, are we not endangering the very future we claim to develop? I mean, children represent the future, and if their very existence is already endangered and then restricted, what then are we developing for? Now I ask, is there a future in that direction? Third, the illusion of flexibility. Opponents, even if you may argue otherwise, you must understand that population control policies is like a moving train. Once set in motion, cannot be reversed. The United Nations World Population Prospect 2024 reports that shows that about 2/3 of the global population growth to 2050 is already currently driven by demographic momentum. This simply means if fertility policies were to change today, the effect will still linger for decades. Look at China, for instance. Despite scrapping its one-child policy, the United Nations forecast shows that it will still battle a shrinking population for the next 75 years. So even if you slam the brake on this moving train, the momentum will still wreak havoc. Now I ask again, is there a future in that direction? Finally, the cost of implementation. Most African countries already face harsh economic realities. With low GDP per capita income, governments struggle to fund basic social programs as alleged by the World Bank. Diverting scarce resources to population control policies will be counterproductive and wasteful. I mean, if we spend what we do not have on the wrong solution, is there a future left in that direction? Audience, African challenges it does not lie in its population size, but in resource management and government. That is the direction for sustainable development. That is the future.
Say, Bolale get a boyfriend, when they misbehave. She get a boyfriend, we no like to spend it. She get a boyfriend, he 2 day kaku. She get a boyfriend, oh my Ijebuwe. She enter her DM, she see I'm up there for la Bolale. Bolale shopper. She enter her DM.
Okay. Thank you. But who are you really peppering? Really? Oh yeah, no. All right, moving on quickly to the rebuttal round. We'll be calling the second speaker from Alexander Brown Hall, Onyechi Osisiogo. Please, a round of applause for her.
Holy Father, I'm screaming my Lady Gaga. She got me in my feelings. I be Adam. For this garden of Eden. Holy Father, my Holy Father. Holy Father, I'm screaming my Lady Gaga.
For lack of knowledge, these idiots are about to perish because, one, they've argued that these policies will affect economies. But on the contrary, we've shown that it actually leads to better healthcare, which in turn increases the number of women in the workforce, so economies are strengthened. Two, they've ignored the unusually high mortality rates for youth, which harm economies, and which population policies protect, by ensuring resources like security are improved on. Two, they slept for 8 good minutes and argued that population control policies harm human rights, ignoring what the UN itself said in 2021, that 160 out of 190 countries already implement these policies, including 35 of 48 in sub-Saharan Africa, and that these policies are mostly voluntary, so human rights are actually protected. Three, they've effectively argued for us when they say that the West controls most of the world's wealth. In that case, it would make more sense to implement policies that not only protect the environment, since we are the most affected, but also ensure human capital develops via adequate immigration policies. In conclusion, Idia once again, leave finals for us. We will take it from here.
And girl, your love don't blind me. I can be like Papa.
Thank you. Now, calling on the speaker taking the rebuttal from Queen Idia All, The second speaker at DJ Praise.
You be right some beats, it has all that. It has all that. It's the concept. I am going for your concept. Baby, how you treat, not my problem. Baby, what you see, just see.
What is correct or best to do? So should we continue to abide in sin and pray that grace abounds? No. My opponent said Africa should implement population control policies that it will guarantee better health care. But according to the WHO, Africa's health care challenges are primarily due to weak health systems, not population size. Again, structure. So should we continue in abide in sin? No. My opponent said that consent is sought by the government and it is voluntary. I ask, did China seek consent before they engaged in forceful abortions? Or did they seek consent when their government took care of other children? So should we continue to abide in this sin? No. My opponent said we might be tempted to implement policies like the China one-child policy. Reality and facts have shown that countries often resort to strict population control policies from either end of the spectrum. So should we continue to abide in this sin? No. Audience, the answer in today's debate is very clear. So I say to my opponents, go and sin no more.
Ọmọ ikọ̀ kaku. Lórí Dangote. Ayé pọ̀ lẹ́yìn ìpọ́njú. Má bẹ̀rù rọ́jú. Sun's gonna shine on everything you do.
Okay. All right. Who do you think? It is small.
Thank you.
Idiao.
Eshegoni. Thank you.
Yay. Wait.
Opajeti.
I like Idia's confidence. So, where are they now? All right. Who do you think is winning? Idia ABH. We shall see about that.
Boya, you will think it's because of your numbers.
Leave them.
All right. While we wait for the results to be collated, we'll take a short musical performance.
You must take this one.
One I bet you are going to enjoy.
So, don't worry. They will still be in top 5.
Just engage them again.
What do you guys for music?
Who is going home tonight? All right, before we take the results, let's welcome Professor Demola Lewis as he gives us the commentaries.
Easy.
Okay, well, Jawwar 2025. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for giving us a very interesting and an evening that was full of wit and words, right? I wonder why the Zikites are not here. Abotishori Burukuni. So, all right. I just need to make a few comments about it. We've had some very good debates tonight. But aside from that, I need to make a comment about delivery. And that's why I was looking for the Zikites. They came to read the news tonight. They were simply reading a script, Speaker 1 and Speaker 2. That is not acceptable. Several other speakers did the same. The first speaker of clinicals read a script most of the time. Good speaker, but scripting. That's not the standard of Jawwar. It's permissible that you have your notes, but you can't spend more time reading the notes than articulating extempore. It's important that we bear that in mind because that is public speaking. So that's for noting because there was hardly any team that didn't have one person who spent a lot of time reading the scripts. I like the calmness of the first speaker of nursing. Most speakers tonight were shouting into the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen. I mean, like, it's not how much noise you make that makes sense. So please, learn. I said it the last time I spoke. You must learn to use a microphone. That's why it's a microphone, so that you don't have to shout. Don't you get the logic? I mean, like, so yeah. Education consistently confused human rights with fundamental human rights. Especially the first speaker. Even after their opponents came and told them exactly what it was. However, they had some very interesting dimensions to logic, which must be applauded as well. I can't say everything, but I must also flog the first speaker of ABH because the speaker did not quite bring out the aspect of sustainable development. It was the second speaker that tried to salvage, or perhaps salvaged, I don't know what the results are, the situation. And I think that it's also important that we all understand the debate before we get into it. I don't know who it was that said that, I think it was nursing, that said about that they were the ones to talk about decentralization of what now? What was the topic for nursing and clinicals? More topic more. Decentralizing revenue allocation. And then nursing comes up to tell us that for decades, revenue allocation has been skewed. By which system? Decentralized. And then you're using that point to puncture decentralization. It didn't make sense at that point, but I mean, just at that point, yeah. However, they had a good number of refutations that resounded. Having said this, I think the main point, not to bore you, is that we need to learn how to use this instrument, and we also need to commit our speech, internalize our speeches, so that we don't have the kind of stuttering and breaks that we have because the person has missed a line in the script. Once you have internalized your scripts, perhaps the organizers would have to think about spreading out the competition a bit so that people can have time. But if you spend all your time internalizing Jawwar, it might affect your CGPA. So Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Man, I need to see you every day.
Thank you very much, sir. Now, the moment we have all been waiting for to announce the results, please welcome Professor Remi Ayede.
We this your big bomb bomb. You left me with no option, gone. I don't feel the night on God.
Before I announce the results, let me just make an important point that sometimes the concepts that are used in these debates have riders. And if you are not a specialist, you misuse them. Take, for instance, the concept of decentralization, which is very prominent today. We have decentralization as a process. We have non-centralization. We have centralization, and we have re-centralization. And sometimes when they want to talk about re-centralization, they use the word centralization. So it's important for us to understand that these words are processes. And because of that, different moments in the process are captured by separate concepts. And one important point that Professor Ademola Lewis made regarding the debate that is connected to sustainable development is that it makes the debate sophisticated, and you are in danger of missing some aspects of it. You either focus on birth control and leave out sustainable development, or over-focus on sustainable development and leave out birth control. You need to balance those concepts, but more importantly, you need to emphasize the connection between the two aspects of the debate. And the more you're able to do it, the better your delivery and the content of your discussion. Now, there were problems of logic. And one of them that I want to point out was the idea that if you have one single case, can you use the word sum? And those who are in philosophy, you remember Aristotle's square of opposition. Once you have a single case, sum will be appropriate. So don't say because you have just one case, sum will not be appropriate. Because if you look at the square of opposition, you know the relationship between generalized statements, specific statements, exceptional statements, and statements that contradict the other. So we have alternative statement, contradictory statement, and opposed statement. So you need to understand the logic to get those things appropriately. Now let's come to the results. We'll start. Now, that was not a case of off the mic. The best speakers in the faculty rounds, we have Bola Rinwa Israel. In the halls. Yes. The best speaker for the whole round, Philade Michael.
All the way from Belu.
I congratulate both winners for the spirited effort they put into this competition. Okay. For the whole category, where is his name here?
His name is Philadelphia Michael.
Yeah, but I have. Is that the sponsor?
Yeah, that's sponsor.
Okay, it's important for me to read that as well. This award is sponsored by Engineer Kayode Adebayo. So I think it's important that we recognize the sponsor. So, and to Michael, congratulations for being the first speaker at the semi-final. And to Bola Rinwa Israel, congratulations for being the first speaker in the whole category.
The mother of all faculties. The mother of all faculties. Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, now the results.
Now the results.
Now the results.
In the debate between the Faculty of Clinical Sciences and Nursing, the Faculty of Nursing has a score of 69.33. A round of applause. While the Faculty of Clinical Sciences has a score of 71.66.
Faculty of Nursing, make some noise!
So the winner is the Faculty of Clinical Sciences.
Faculty of Clinical Sciences.
I'm the best my generation ever seen. I came suddenly, I be like Nepa Bill.
The road to finals.
Between the Faculty of Law and Education.
One house.
The Faculty of Education goes with a score of 76.08. While the Faculty of Law has 72.83.
Faculty of Education! Faculty of Education! Make some noise! Wow! Education! Woo! One, two.
Good. Hey. Find a silver lining where the mother said I need patience in due time and I'll be reclining by design. I've been grinding for my needs. What I to give my nephew, put them diamonds on my knees, shining so dope that I purchased 88 keys for mama to play a song and call my 88.
What else?
I can get him really hate.
What else, please?
What else? We still have some results to announce. Please calm down. Jawwar 2025.
Bell rings and then my hands are raised. MGM Grand Mandalay.
Education, yes. Thank you.
Thank you, education.
Calm down.
Calm down.
Education, thank you now.
Calm down.
Please be calm.
Please calm down.
Calm down.
Please, let's get to the next stage. Thank you for keeping quiet. Thank you for coming down. Thank you for keeping quiet.
Please be calm.
Education. Please
One
calm
house.
down.
Thank you so much. Check. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2.
In the contest between Nnamdi Azikiwe Hall and okay, we have Nnamdi Azikiwe Hall 66.83, Sultan Bello Hall 74.16.
Sultan Bello Hall. And the winner for that category is
the best.
Sultan
Number
Bello Hall.
one and nothing less.
DJ.
Lead me to my.
In the contest between ABH and Queen Nidia Hall,
ladies and gentlemen,
Queen Nidia Hall has a score of 7.
Wait.
While Queen Nidia Hall 74.66, ABH 69.33.
I have waited patiently. I have vision, though I believe. I know I can count on.